Hello and welcome to TED Talks. Today I will be speaking about a needs assessment I did for the club sports program at Appalachian State University. So first let me speak a little bit about the club sports program. For many students, they make their lifelong friends in the club sports program, and it is an amazing opportunity we have here in college to continue athletic endeavors of many different sorts. And I wanted to see what makes the program work and what does not work so well, because there's always room for improvement with anything that you work towards. So the purpose of this evaluation was to determine the satisfaction level of participants in the club sports program and to examine the reason behind these reported levels. I didn't want to just look at the satisfaction level. I wanted to know what people were satisfied with and what people were unsatisfied with. So, starting off, I had to come up with a method to do this evaluation. So, it started off with a survey created using SurveyMonkey. And the first portion of this was to determine the sampling procedure, which also includes determining what the population was. So the population for this survey was any club sports participant currently at Appalachian State University. And in an ideal situation, quota sampling would be used. Though the sampling using the entire population is difficult because the rosters change throughout the semester. So determining who is a current member on a club sports program, who's paid their dues, who has participated in games and practices and all that is really difficult to determine. So my method was to contact the current officers of each team and ask them if they could send out the survey to their current players. So that is an issue right off the get-go with contacting participants. And then there is an external validity issue. So this study is only valid for Appalachian State because club sports programs are run completely differently depending on where you are, the school you are in, the club sport you are participating in. The clubs here at Appalachian State are also run very differently from each other. So this study only pertains to Appalachian State. Those similar studies could be done and then compared to different schools to see how programs compare against each other. Materials for this, there really were no physical materials, just a survey made through SurveyMonkey. So the procedure, first get permission from club sports, just contacting them to make sure that they're okay with these surveys being sent out. And then obviously send out the survey and wait for participants to reply. So moving on to results. One of the questions I asked off the bat was participant satisfaction. I used a rating scale, 1 being very dissatisfied, 10 being very satisfied. So scoring 1 through 10, the survey showed that 65% of those that answered this question indicated a level 7 or above for satisfaction. So the bar graph showed a bell-shaped curve heavily weighted towards the right side, which means most people, or 65% of people, were satisfied with their experience with club sports. So that is a good indication for club sports off the get-go. In another chart, I looked at response by team type, and what I mean by team type is whether the team is male, female, or co-rec. And this showed uneven results. For Appalachian State University, co-rec offers the most sports, and next women's, and then lastly men's specific sports. So the results showed the highest concentration of women-only sports answered this survey. Next was co-rec, and then the fewest were males. So if the quota sampling had been perfect, it would have shown the highest number of responses coming from co-rec sports. Secondly, obviously women's, and then men's. So this could potentially skew data depending on how off the results are compared to the actual population. And then another chart that I looked at were time spent participating. I included this because it did show some interesting spikes. So basically the answers could be anywhere from 0 to, 0.5 semesters all the way up to 8 semesters. And there were spikes, large spikes, at 2 semesters, 4 semesters, and 8 semesters. The participants had been with club sports. So I found that interesting and had to look at why this might be. And another thing that I found within the results where I asked whether participants would be willing to pay higher dues for access to better facilities. And then a second question was if participants would be willing to pay higher dues for access to more facilities, because I hear a lot of complaints from the club sports in general that facilities aren't distributed equally and that they're not up to par. And so of those that answered the questions, 41% said that they would be willing to pay higher dues for better facilities, and 31% said that they would be willing to pay dues for more access to more facilities. So this is a concern that some people have, according to the results. Conclusions and recommendations. So as I said before, 65% of those that answered the survey showed a high satisfaction level with their club sports program. Though this does not mean that club sports should stop trying to improve their programming just because most people are already satisfied. And as I said before, with the graph that showed the distribution of co-rec teams that answered the survey, women's teams that answered the survey, and men's teams that answered the survey, it is, first of all, difficult to measure the exact figures for these groups because the team dynamics are constantly changing throughout the semester. Also, some sports are in season for 2 semesters. Some are in season for only a portion of the year. So, for example, snowboarding is not going to be done in August and in April. Um, so, because of this, the data may have been skewed slightly. Recommendations. Moving forward, I would suggest using a more concise survey with that allows for more quantitative data. The data that I did receive was interesting but difficult to interpret some of the time, and if there had been more quantitative data, it would be easier to really visually represent how club sports has what they're doing right and what could be improved. Also, implementing a shorter survey would likely yield more results, and more people would complete the survey. And then, as I said before, more precise quota sampling, figuring out exactly what percentage of each team needs to answer the survey for it to be valid, which would likely require a lot more time. I'd have to, we were given the time constraint of a semester to put all of this together, so the survey would have to be open for much longer, and there'd have to be likely some sort of incentive for people to answer the survey. Maybe club sports could, if they were to run the survey, maybe they could incentivize it with a budget point. So each team that gets enough people to fill out the survey gets a budget point. And then also, one recommendation for this is to, if it's possible, if people have past participants or access to past participants, have them also fill out the survey. Find out if people stopped playing in the middle of their college career, why. Did it have something to do with the team itself, time management, things like that. And then that would really give club sports a whole sense of how well their program is doing. And I guess that is about all that I have for you all today. Thank you for listening.